Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Thursday. We are getting closer to the weekend, which means of course we're getting closer to Chelsea's first pre-season game of this summer against Club America in Las Vegas. Very excited for that game, to see the formation, to see some of the players back in action, whether we get a glimpse of Raheem Sterling, who's now in training with Chelsea. We'll have to wait and see. But I mean, transfers have blown up, haven't they, in recent days? It's kind of been a bit mad. We had, of course, Raheem Sterling, the announcement last night. Koulibaly went from kind of a vague target to one that was very serious, to then the deal being wrapped up. And we believe now, today, he's going to be taking his medical, and when that announcement will be officially made, we're not entirely sure, but you know, he's going to be out in LA securing his move to Chelsea, which is big. That's a big addition that we spoke about. And then I signed off last night, made that video, uploaded it, and then saw the news about Presnel Kimpembe and obviously the links to Levil Colwill and his future, and it kind of blew up on Twitter last night. And even this morning, we've had more news about another rumour targeting Cristiano Ronaldo. So it's becoming a bit mad, but I can't say I'm overly shocked. When I was speaking earlier in the window, particularly post the takeover being confirmed, of how busy this summer was going to be, not only in terms of players coming in, players going out, but you know, even stuff as like the kit launch. As you can see, I've got the new Chelsea shirt, bought it today. Just a load of stuff that Chelsea and the new ownership had to sort of catch up with because of the sanctions, and it's now starting to happen. So it's a bit mad, but it's fun to speak about and debate, isn't it? But before we get into the news today, make sure, guys, if you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the uploads on the channel. Thank you as well, guys, for subscribing to my Substack that I started last week. The first piece is out there if you haven't read it already. It's about Thomas Tuchel and what he needs to do this season to kind of improve Chelsea. There'll be another piece going up at the weekend, probably around Chelsea and likely pre-season, but it may involve Levil Colwill. I'm not quite sure on the subject yet, but thank you guys for your support on that. It really does mean the world. And if you haven't signed up yet, it's free to do so, and you get all my new articles to your email. So there we go. But let's get into the news. Firstly here, Cristiano Ronaldo. Various media reports this morning about Cristiano Ronaldo and how Chelsea basically now are not going to be signing him this summer. After that speculation a few weeks ago, we had the George Mendes and Todd Bowley meeting. Then there was a lot of sort of chaos around that. What's going to happen? Are Chelsea going to try and sign Ronaldo? And then we had David Ornstein breaking it in The Athletic a few Mondays ago. I think it was the week before last. About Chelsea considering a move, and Matt Law reporting there was going to be a meeting between Tuchel and Todd Bowley over this deal, and it's kind of been gone quiet. And it's like, are Chelsea actually going to try and do this with Ronaldo trying to push his move out of United this summer? But now we've got it. Adam Newson here, my friend and colleague over in LA. Chelsea have made a huge Ronaldo transfer decision, and they are no longer interested in signing Ronaldo from Man United this summer. The Portuguese superstar wants to leave Old Trafford just a year after returning to the club from Juventus. Ronaldo's desire to continue playing in the Champions League is understood to be the driving force behind his decision, and he has not joined up with Erik ten Hag's squad for United's pre-season tour of Thailand and Australia. Chelsea co-owner Todd Bowley, who's currently acting as the club's interim sporting director following the departures of Marina Granovskaya and Petr Cech, was pitched the 37-year-old forward during a meeting with Ronaldo's agent George Mendes last month. And basically they've had the meeting. Tuchel was actually giving some quotes, because obviously a lot of media is out there currently in LA, and there's players giving interviews, and Tuchel, I think, was the latest to do an interview, and he was asked about Ronaldo directly, but I think this is great news. It makes just logical sense, and that's what you want to see from Chelsea. Chelsea are signing superstars in a sense that Raheem Sterling is a big superstar. I mean, I don't know if this is just a flaw of Chelsea's own website, but Chelsea's website crashed like 10 minutes after they announced Raheem Sterling last night. He's a massive star. He has name recognition. Same with Koulibaly. Same with potentially other players Chelsea are going in for this summer. But those players don't overshadow the club. They're not going to engulf everything. All the conversations aren't going to surround them. That is the problem with Ronaldo at this point in his career, as you know, an icon of the game basically. And we saw the negative impact that had at Man United last summer. We've spoken about the tactical sort of flaws of a deal like this, but also the wages. I mean, when Chelsea have to secure new contracts for the likes of Mason Mount and Reece James, you can probably throw Edmond Mendy in there to really readjust the balance in Chelsea's wage structure. A player of Ronaldo's magnitude and his wage demands would have blown out of the water as well, and probably hurt Chelsea, I think, in the short and long term as well. And it just, tactically, it just makes no sense when Tuchel was speaking last year about, and this was obviously in reference to Lukaku, about Chelsea being a team. We don't sort of act towards one player. And Ronaldo is the ultimate individual, particularly at this point in his career. Listen, Ronaldo 3 or 4 years ago, I think most people, a majority of people would have liked that deal, even without him being able to press. That was a very different Chelsea. And I think a lot of people would have taken the pros, obviously, with Ronaldo. And listen, he still scores goals. I think wherever he goes, if he does move from United, even if he stays at United, he will probably still score goals. But there are quite clearly limitations in a game where Chelsea don't have the ball, that Tuchel really needs his players to counter press, and obviously Ronaldo wouldn't have brought that. And then of course you've got all the other elements like the character, like the exposure, like the interest, which sounds good on paper, sounds flashy and nice, but can have its drawbacks, as we saw at United last year, and why he wants to leave. But let's get into some more concrete transfer news over a target that could be signing for Chelsea this summer in the defence to go along with Koulibaly, and that is Presnel Kimpembe. So this report from David Ornstein in The Athletic last night that Chelsea are in talks to sign the PSG defender really blew up because it was linked to Fabrizio Romano tweeting about Levil Colwill, that he is now likely to leave on a permanent deal this summer, as Tuchel and Boli are working to sign 3 top centre-backs. He continues to say Chelsea and Levil Colwill will make a decision soon as Koulibaly deal is done. Kimpembe and Ake in talks. And I just want to add, before we get into the opinions on this, that Ben Jacobs tweeted just before I started recording this video, that my understanding with Levil Colwill is there is no shortage of interest. Southampton and Leicester both rate the 19-year-old. Colwill has not asked for a permanent move. He seeks clarity, though, of his long-term role and future at Chelsea. It's similar to Armando Broja. He continues, the challenge a lot of big clubs have is in providing clear pathways to young talent. From Colwill's perspective, he did all he could at Huddersfield to show he's developing into a Premier League centre-back. But Chelsea also need instant and proven defenders capable of a Champions League level. You know my opinion on this, right? And there are so many different ways you can go into this, right? And I have kind of 3 points to this. Firstly, it's the value in selling Colwill this summer, because Chelsea could probably attract a similar fee to what they got for Guehi, maybe a little bit more if you kind of go in the element that, well, Guehi improved Crystal Palace. He proved very quickly that he was probably worth a lot more than 20 million. But it's going to be 20 to 30 million for a player who hasn't stepped foot in the Premier League and is 19 years old. And a club like Southampton, a club like Leicester would in some ways be taking a punt on a player. But, with the hope that he's going to develop into a player worth a lot more than that very quickly. And the value from the Chelsea perspective here, and I go back to Guehi, I go back to Tomori, of the money right now, if you just isolate it down, even though I don't really buy it, mainly because there's the fear of what's going to happen very quickly with Levil Colwill, like it did with Mark Guehi, is you take 20 million, and a lot of people are kind of framing last summer's deal for Guehi to Palace for about 20 million as great business for Chelsea. You sold someone who hasn't stepped foot in the Premier League, he's got little time on his contract, this is going to work, it just makes sense to take the money now. Very quickly, Mark Guehi established himself in the Premier League, and now, if Mark Guehi was to be sold by Crystal Palace, maybe not this summer but next summer, Palace are guaranteed a profit on Mark Guehi. They just are. And it may be Chelsea the ones paying for that, to make that profit, knowing our sort of way of doing business and buying back our academy products. So there's that for Kyle Tomori. Listen, you can talk about the context of that situation and Lampard's hand in that, and Tuchel really, he was out on loan by the time Tuchel arrived. But 25 million, another deal that does not look like good business very quickly for Chelsea. You look at how important Tomori has been to AC Milan since he joined them on loan, and he's got a new contract. They've just won the league. He's a massive centre-back. He should be playing more on international level for England, absolutely. Another one that's gone. So you let those 2 players go, and there's examples there of the cost to Chelsea. And this is the big thing about the academy that's just an obvious financial point, is it saves the club money in a lot of ways. It saves us money from having to buy squad players. That's going to be my 3rd point here, because we have a very obvious and recent example of how this works out well. But you look at Reece James, you look at Mason Mount, the 2 great examples in the current Chelsea team, and obviously their contract situation is of massive importance this summer. And those were two players who in the summer of 2019, 3 years ago now, there was still doubts about, they're going to have to adapt to the Premier League. They're going to have to get into the team. They're going to have to prove themselves. But very quickly showed themselves to be key first team players. In the Champions League final in 2021, when Chelsea won it, when people there's a lot of strawmen, let's just get into this, because there's a lot of strawmen arguments that are thrown back when people argue for promoting young talent. And one of them is, Chelsea, you want a squad full of academy players. No one's ever arguing for that. That's a really dumb argument because, again, I've seen arguments that say you want Chelsea to be in the Championship. You don't want to compete for Premier League titles. You don't want to compete for Champions League titles. Again, no one's making that argument. You're making up a false argument that none of us are making. You want this guy to play 65 games a season. No one's making that argument again. I think that people have to address these arguments front and centre. What a lot of people are just asking for is, what is the logic in selling a young centre-back to then Chelsea have to go and buy a player who potentially isn't as good as the one we could have developed internally in the first place? And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And when you sell Gurhi and he goes on and becomes better, when you sell Tomori and he goes on and becomes better, and Chelsea lose 2 senior centre-backs, potentially 3 this summer, and have to go out and sign a load of them, the squad planning doesn't make a lot of sense. It really doesn't, particularly with the gift of Cobham that keeps on producing these players. And I'll come to him. Trevor Chalobah was you couldn't think of a better example last season, because Chalobah is still developing himself. He isn't quite Mason, he isn't quite Reece yet. I'm not saying he can't get there, and he's proven he's had some good performances, and I think in sort of the top 5-6 performers of last season, I think Chalobah's in there. I think he really is, and I think he probably should have played a little bit more at the back end of the season. But here was a guy who last summer could have been sold. This wasn't a player obviously going to be brought into the first team. He'd been on loan at Lorient, he'd been on loan at Ipswich, he'd been on loan at Huddersfield in recent years. But he came in, got his opportunity, which is what these players are asking for, which is what Colwill is asking for, which is what Broja are asking for. They aren't going in and slamming their fist on the table at the age of 18 and 19 and 20 and saying, I have to play week in, week out, or I'm off. Chalobah saved Chelsea about 50 to 60 million, and potentially more in the future if he continues to grow. He became a first team player. He became an option. I think Chelsea's best back three last season was when Chalobah was there alongside Thiago Silva and Antonio Rudiger. He got decent minutes. He really grew as a player. He got that new contract. He sees himself now as a Chelsea first team player. The value there is obvious. Colwill, for me, with the potential he has, if Chelsea sell him now for 20 million, I would bet quite a bit that by the time we get to next July, Colwill will be worth a lot more than that, in my opinion. And again, it just comes back to Chelsea sort of strategy. And this is it leads into sort of why there is a flaw in just backing one manager's vision, because they are only, and I understand why Tuchel's doing it, because he cares about the now. He wants players who are going to perform for him at a very quick sort of level and just go in and instantly impact things. I mean, I don't know the logic of Nathan Ake. I really don't. I don't know why Ake is such a grand upgrade on, say, promoting Levil Colwill. I don't really see the long-term value in that personally for me. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. If we sign 2 centre-backs, because for many months it was kind of framed that Chelsea are going to sign 2 centre-backs this summer. Now it's gone up to 3. Now we've even heard reports that Chelsea want a new wing-back as well. Is that on top of the 3 centre-backs? Because it was kind of like, well, the third centre-back could kind of be a wing-back as well. But, if you've signed 3 centre-backs and a wing-back on top of that, because Ian Maatson has gone out on loan, Colwill is obviously going to think about his future. And I think he's right to. I mean, Kimpembe, people have made this reference because, of course, Tuchel worked with Kimpembe. He was a guy who came through the academy at PSG. He was a guy who, very young, developed, got minutes, got that opportunity, improved himself. It's this weird kind of thing where for Chelsea to look at a player, they have to, Ake is the prime example. He went away from Chelsea in 2017, got Premier League experience, went to Man City, became a Premier League champion, and now we're buying him back because of his credibility, because of his experience. And logically, it just does not make much sense to me to dispense of Colwill. It's not the best case example, because I think there is a perfect opportunity now for a succession plan at Chelsea with Koulibaly, with Thiago Silva, with Trevor Chalobah, And potentially, if you add another centre-back on top of that with Colwill mixed in there as well, for the next, and I said this when the Koulibaly news came out, that there is a chance to really develop these players, and then by the time Silva and Koulibaly are on the way out, you've got the next level of defender. You've got the defenders who have gained experience and gained enough minutes. The idea there would be no minutes next season for these players is ridiculous. I mean, it really is, because we've got the World Cup, we've got a ridiculously congested start to the season where a lot of games, particularly Champions League ones, have to be fit in to work around the World Cup, and then you've got 5 subs, some more opportunities off the bench. The post-World Cup malaise, I think, is going to be very real this season. So you've got players, say if Colwill sticks around, who aren't going to be going to the World Cup, who could be there post the World Cup to really fill in for those players who are probably have gone quite far if you need to rotate in intense periods of the season. And his potential, I think, is quite clear, and his impact, like Gerhi in the Championship, like Tomori in the Championship, is quite obvious. And the argument that these players are not ready, they shouldn't be given opportunities, is undermined by the players that have thrived in recent years at Chelsea. And listen, I'm not banging my fist like the players aren't and saying he needs to be starting in front of Koulibaly. I'm not saying that. That's never been an argument. That's not an argument. It's about a player being given a chance and a pathway to see, okay, I'm not going to play 35 games this season. I can maybe play up to 20 like Chalobah did last season. But then there is that path to grow and get better. And it kind of just comes back to why structurally I think Chelsea need a sporting director, because you need someone who there's going to be in that room to say, and you'd hope maybe Bowley himself, the public sort of statements about trusting the academy and trusting in the youth and seeing that how the balance between elite talent that we bring in like Koulibaly and Sterling matches and blends with those squad options that can become first teamers from the academy, and now it saves you money to buy those elite talents. And I'm not sure if either Kimpembe and particularly Nathan Ake fill that quota for me. But listen, if we sell Colwill and there'd be likely a buyback, or maybe in a better scenario like Ian Matson, convince Colwill that a loan is there for him. I mean, again, you'd have to revisit the situation in a year's time. And if we are signing players like Kimpembe who are still coming into their prime, that it's not like you're signing a Koulibaly where you can kind of give the argument to Colwill that, look, this is a guy in his prime years, but he isn't going to be here for 7 years probably. I mean, it's unlikely. And Thiago Silva has likely not got a lot of years left in him at the top level for Chelsea. So there's that succession plan there. But let me know your opinion. I know a lot of people will turn around and go, again, the same old arguments that standards and all of that nonsense that gets thrown back at me and others when we talk about the academy. I think we can have a more reasonable discussion about this than just saying it's about throwing away any chance of winning trophies. You've seen me on this channel. I'm excited about Koulibaly coming in. I think he can raise the level of Chelsea's defence. About sort of having that balance that, as I say, you go back to the Chalobah case, which is such a great example last year of Chelsea finding a player who adds value, that's suitable, that saves money, but is also a good squad option that at times during last season became a first team player and really proved himself, and I think learnt a lot, and he said as much himself. But those are my thoughts. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.